But for the most part, everybody's so excited to have a female artist. So we have so many women now. We have probably 30% of our clients are women. And that's unheard of. I mean, it's just such a rainbow. It's so wonderful to be there.
That's fantastic.
My local, the range I normally go to is in Manassas.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the region. Not like Manassas, it looks like the DC region. If I go to the other range, which I don't normally go to so much in Ashburn, I don't know how it worked out that way, but it did. It also looks roughly the same. I'm closer to the NRA range, but I haven't set foot in there in years.
Is there still in Fairfax?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still in the headquarters building. And I have a funny story about there. I went there with a bunch of the big pros for a DC project to take people, and Diana Muller turns around and looks at me and says, "Oh, this is what you've been talking about ranges. I don't ever shoot like this." I mean, like, they had no idea. So a lot of the issues we see are not the individual ranges or even the individual people, it's industry. So, you know, I agree with you. I think getting all of our voices out there, getting, you know, I mean, we've got several on just this that are people that are getting stuff out into the industry in a different way. What do you think we as the new voices, the small voices, aren't, and I mean all we, you, me, John, everybody, what are we not talking about that we should be talking about?
Police. Hands effing down. That is going to be the hardest hurdle for the broader gun community to deal with. That people of all the upcoming generation, not even just people of color, and I'm not just talking BIPOC here, I'm talking about everyone who is young, sees the police as not an enhancement to their security, but a risk to their security. And the gun community broadly has often been deeply... I did an interview with a fellow named the Gun Penguin on his channel on YouTube. And like we got into it there too, we weren't mixing it up. I just kind of did the same rant. Like, it's deeply upsetting to a lot of people that I try to bring to ranges who are either young or people of color, and they're just seeing like blue live Punisher skulls over here, and just sometimes there's justice, sometimes there's just us. Like this weird badge worship thing that goes on. And policing is not the gun community. Policing is not shooting. They're very distinct worlds. Yes, police own firearms and maybe at the range, but the idea of the sort of the police pro FOP bumper sticker crowd, many people see those as culturally neutral totems, but the next generation sees them very much as harassment and fear to them, and they will just stay away. Yeah, that's I kind of like slammed in with that answer, but I hear it over and over and over from new shooters.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's that, and I think it's that we don't talk about that it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about you have to have a gun, you have to be your own first responder, you have to be, you know, the world is dangerous. And frankly, the left has been horrible about this the past year. The world is dangerous. Look at all the Proud Boys,
mm-hmm.
you know, neo-Nazis, alt-right, blah, go, you know, I mean, go through the list. They're coming for you. You should be armed. You should be on the street. You should be armed. How about I just want to go to the range?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how about I want to go shoot some 3-gun?
Yeah.
How about I want to go do a steel challenge because my favorite thing in the whole world is 22. You know, I mean, really, that's how about shotgun? You know, I mean, I feel like I agree with you that we don't talk about it. How do you think we get the industry to listen to us when we have two huge things that the industry is not talking about that we've come up with just on this call?
Well,
make it profitable.
Yeah, the issue with police is all these people that, you know, they're pro-gun and they fly this thin blue line flag and it's everything like that. And it's just kind of like, my question to them is, who do you think is going to take your guns away?
Bingo.
And, you know, because the police are going to follow orders. they do not adhere to the Constitution, and that's the line that I keep you know, because you can fly as many pro-gun or pro-police flags as you want, but it's not going to matter in the end.
Are you all getting to shoot with Leos and military people? Because like in my range, like
Yeah.
we have a lot of Leos that come in. We have a lot, and my dad was a cop, and I come from a military family as well. So like, you know, we shoot together. They don't want my guns. They don't want to come for my guns. And that's one of the jokes. Like all of us that have a lot of guns, they don't want to come see us because they know how many guns we have.
Something.
They know how much we train. We train with them. You know, and I think sometimes, like at my range, again, we have all those people, and we have young people that are coming in from the city, from Baltimore City, which, you know, we all know Baltimore City. But we have young people coming out, young people of color coming out. I bring my tribe's people out, and we all shoot together. So people get a chance to talk to each other. And I think communication is such an important part of that.
Something I try to make a distinction on is, and this is like just a phrase that I use so much when people say, "Oh, you're anti-police," and I say, "No, I'm not anti-policeman. I'm anti-policing." It is systems and policies that are the structure of the problem. Individual people are very reasonable on a one-to-one basis usually, but changing policies and changing the system is how we both solve violence and move things forward. But I ran over David for a second. Please go ahead.
I have a couple of points from all of the research that I did in the lead up to talking to representatives. There are 3 policies that reduce the misuse of firearms. The first of which is raising the minimum wage because that reduces deaths of despair, including suicide. The second one, cure violence in violence interrupter programs, which, and I'm going to reference Guns Guide to Liberals that you talk about explicitly. And it's clearly that will reduce interpersonal violence in what are known as honor cultures, which sadly we have in the United States. And violence interrupter programs, cure violence type programs tend to reduce those. The third one is remediating lead plumbing and remediating lead paint, because we know that leads to increased impulsivity and increased social violence as a result. So those are the 3 policies. These are not quick, these are not sexy, these are kind of boring, but those matter. As for the policing side, I am profoundly uncomfortable with where the entire national conversation is going. Our system of policing is broken. It is badly broken because I don't think it serves I don't think it serves anyone, but at the same time, we do need to think about how do we assure public safety and how do we deal with bad actors. That a little discussion and you know, and a little bit of politeness, you go to, you know, solves the problem. And that is the challenge, particularly when, and again, different minority communities experience this differently. Being Jewish, there is a long and ugly tradition of anti-Semitic violence. And in the United States, that has tended to lead towards fairly good relations between Jews and Jewish communities and police. It leads to its own problems, where we have perverse things like where I normally go for high holiday services, where they actually are police posted, and in years past, they have traditionally, because this is in downtown DC, have been African American. There's still people who understandably don't think that's the most inviting, but we also have the issue where there are people who pour anti-Semitic poison into their own eyes and ears and then act on it. And I don't know how to fix that, because that sort of problem has been around for probably 2,000 years. Or I should say definitely 1,000 years. And I don't think, and I'm being a pessimist here, that there's a cultural fix for that. That there's a way that you can norm that out of existence.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree that policing as it's done now, I don't think really serves anyone except possibly some insiders.
Yeah, and I think that it's important for people in the gun culture who don't go to SHOT Show and who aren't part of LEO military side of it to understand industry side how important LEO and military are to the industry.
Oh, yeah.
You and me and everyone on this call shopping, we're the little fries. They don't they don't care that much about us. When you go to SHOT Show, more than half is geared to military and LEO. It is a military LEO industry, and that is something that we, on the side who are talking about the individual rights, are going to have to reckon with when we talk about how are we going to deal with this, right? And I really like your idea about it's not the police, it's the policing, because we're going to have to get buy-in at an industry level when we start talking about this, if we want to bring these young kids in who say, I see this as something detrimental to my life. And the industry is definitely not there. I mean, not us in the industry, but the industry writ large.
Yeah.
The Remingtons and Vista and Daniel Defense and all those guys and Silencer Co. We're not there. We're not the clients that they care about.
Exactly.
They market to us.
And that's a real smack of a moment when you realize that you're not what you thought you were. I remember I was I had a UPS store box once, and I was shipping. This is way when this organization I'm part of named Tool was really small, and we were shipping lockpicks. And one day I asked the staff, I'm like, hey, I'm in here like every week shipping 50 to 100 boxes. I'm like, we must be one of your bigger customers. Do you have any special rate plans or anything? And the guy was like, your bigger customer, get the fuck out of here. Because I was like, no, I had no concept, because you walk in, you deal with the clerk, and you leave. He's like, no. We have people in the city that are shipping 10,000 boxes a week, and we do it because that's what our job is. Don't get above your station. So yeah, realizing that most of us, and maybe to flip it on its head, the companies that we all think of as brands, as you said, their bottom line is police and military, and they see us not as a market segment to serve. They see us as, how do I make some extra scratch without harming my relationship with my bread and butter?
I wanted to jump in on the topic of policing real quick. So, as people who take firearms and self-defense seriously, the deeper you get into this, the more expert you become on issues of use of force. Right? So I find myself being in the difficult situation perpetually of, since my business is one of the businesses that cares about relationships with police and military and cultivating those relationships and the opportunities that come to us as a result of them being clients. It's like, imagine if you lived in an ethnically segregated neighborhood and all of your neighbors were of a particular ethnicity, and you went to their houses and their kids' birthdays and their barbecues and all of these things, and you lived there among them and understood their culture and the issues that they go through. And it just so happens that is the police, right? And you know what they're dealing with as officers, right? So we experience the institution of policing as customers, and they experience the institution of policing as providers of that service. But they're also kind of at the officers who interface with the public are at the bottom of that institutional hierarchy for the most part. And they believe, to a great degree, that reform needs to occur also. It's just a reform of a different kind. And so I'm continually in the awkward position of being the more liberally minded friend among my friends who happens to have deep experience with police as officers and the institution of policing, as well as being, as a result of years of training, much more expert in use of force than they are. So you'll see something tragic occur in the news, and you'll understand all of the social variables that cause the instant to arise where an individual is in violent conflict with the police. And while all of the nebula of causal factors that led up to that moment can be diagnosed as things that we can solve, it's hard to be in a position where you can't say anything other than, well, I don't know if I would have done anything other than shot that person in this exigent circumstance. And so you have to be it's difficult to parse out for people who view the police as a negative institution the fact that something they're witnessing in a couple seconds of video is tragic, but it's also potentially totally appropriate and justifiable in the instant, while also being positioned to fairly call out the police when they do something that is unacceptable, because those things do occur, right? And one of the upsides of living in the police neighborhood is that when the genuinely unacceptable things happen, all of the professionals that I'm in touch with look at it and identify it as unacceptable. And however, their diagnosis for how to remedy that is totally different.
Right.
Right? There was a recent police shooting in Philadelphia, which we witnessed on tape. The police responded to a young man who was having like a mental health crisis, and he had a knife. And some of my friends who continually say things like, we should defund the police, were like, well, why didn't they just tase him? Well, the Philadelphia Police Department budget to Axon, or Axion, or whatever it is, who makes the tasers,
Axon,
is like $900,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And that's for equipment, training, cartridges.
It's almost all cameras.
Yeah, all of that stuff. And they don't have enough money to give all the cops tasers and training for tasers, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't, on the one hand, ask to defund the police and then be upset when they don't have the equipment to take the action that you would prefer they take. The other drawback, however, is that things like tasers are used occasionally as budget controlling devices where they replace a software problem or a skill set problem with a hardware problem. You know, I have friends who teach essentially martial arts to police, and they're of the opinion, broadly speaking, that every cop should be a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, because that will reduce the number of cops who, when you increase someone's hands-on skill level, you increase the threshold before which they're inclined to require to use lethal force, right? The problem is that making all of your cops a blue belt is an insanely expensive proposition. So it's a very complicated circumstance to try to be rigorously honest about, because on the one hand, you are aware that a lot of the circumstances that police are involved in are because their department has X budget and has to train Y number of cops to some minimum threshold that people think is acceptable. And that minimum threshold that people think is acceptable is fraught with a whole array of unintended consequences, especially when you layer it on top of all of the intractable social dilemmas that we need to revise simultaneously to improving the police. But on the other hand, not everything that the cops do is terrible, because were I in their circumstance, there are plenty of instances where people get upset to see someone get shot, and it's like, I can't say I wouldn't have shot the dude who was 10 feet away from me with a knife, honestly.
Deviant, your point, there's a program called Cahoots. I don't remember where it is. I think Salem, Oregon?
Eugene. It's in Eugene. Yep.
And that sounds like an absolutely brilliant set of interventions for people having mental health crises.
Yeah, I didn't want to run over John, but the idea that the police are just de facto going to show up, that is the norm in most cities, but not everywhere. It's a failure of imagination, and the Cahoots program has cleared that hurdle. The police do not show up sometimes, but it's not the norm. But I continue, please.
Right. I think that programs like Cahoots, I think, are brilliant. And I think that in certain cases, mental health, I think it's a paramedic and a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
They show up if they have a concern. They can call the police. If the police show up and they say this is a mental health thing, they can radio and have the Cahoots fans show up, and they can just back off, which works for everyone. And what's not to like about that? It seems like policing is a little bit of a blunt tool. And like with lock picking, you need to use the exact right tool in the right lock to get the desired result.
And of course, Eugene is a metropolitan area, but it's not large. They don't have traffic problems. They don't even have the bridges and the rivers that Seattle or Portland does. So the idea of someone just showing up, it's feasible in a way that it may not be. A volunteer they have a very small volunteer force who are just very, very effective because they can show up rapidly.
I have a question for Deviant. I know he has a broader scope than a lot of us do.
Yes, Bert.
I recently was involved with a New York Times reporter on an article she was writing prior to the election on how guns were sort of on both sides. It's an interesting article. And one of the things, I walked her through a gun show up in, I think it was in Manassas, and one of the observations she had, and you talked about Blue Lives Matter flags and the Trump stickers. One of the things she noticed was that side of the gun community has sort of staked a claim to the American flag.
That's true.
She made an observation that when I see a flag, I'm good, bad, or indifferent. It gives me a certain thought process about that person because that side of the community has staked the claim to we own the American flag, and if you don't support this flag, reflecting back to Colin Kaepernick, then you are some deviant who doesn't belong in our community, in our country. So I wonder what your observations have been on that particular aspect of this discussion.
A lot of that comes down to the fact that I'm going to use the word left really broadly. On the political left being such a big tent, you get a number of people who are, some people are like very happy to fly the flag, some people are very neutral on the flag, and other people are, the American flag is the greatest sign of hatred that the world has ever known. And so all these positions get mushed together under the more progressive banner, and it means that we don't see as many flags. It means that if you show up at any kind of march for human rights or anything, as you point out, if you have a flag, someone's going to get in your face and be like, why are you infiltrating our movement? That's a real hard number. I feel like changing the cultural landscape and changing the discussion of what mainstream America represents is a big part of changing what the flag represents to other people. And some of that, again, those of us who are able to allocate a position and speak our mind quickly, rapidly, and deliver the message, no, I'm not your enemy, I'm here, I'm in solidarity with you, and also, simultaneously, those of us who have a lot of privilege and protection who can show up and not suffer consequences, not suffer ostracism in our own group, not suffer a lot of negative police interactions just by showing up in the middle of a fight. Someone's not going to say you're the aggressor. Being able, I will show up at the March for Women's Lives. I'll show up at a lot of marches. I will have an American flag, maybe subdued on my shoulder, or maybe we should have bigger flags. But selling the idea that they, here I am othering, right? They don't own the American flag is a really important point to mention. The idea that there can be certain unifying banners, certain unifying causes, and ways to hang our hat on a certain peg that we all share, that's really, it is a terrible statement of the world when our national banner, our national standard can be thought of as not belonging to all of us. And the fact that we have broad enough discussions that even that idea comes up, because many of us, Like, a lot of us don't think about that. I genuinely forget about that a lot of the time. Again, a military family, like, we just have a flag. Flag goes out on Flag Day, like, goes out on Veterans Day. That we don't think about that. That's important, too. I really wish, God, all I can say, it's a shitty way to end it. I thank God that the people who are not politically aligned with me find new and unique ways every day to pervert the flag and add crap to it, or turn it into a shirt, or add stripes that, like, there's a gold stripe on the flag now and some of these. I don't know what they're doing, but keep like screwing up the flag so that at least the actual flag maybe has a chance.
No, just every single thing we do, where it's liberal gun owners, anything else like that, we need to fly the flag with that, and reclaim it.
I'm into that.